And hello, Betsy. And I think we'll just give it about one more minute before I begin. Well, hello, everybody. This is Stuart Malina. I'm the music director of the Lake Placid Sinfonietta, and I'm broadcasting to you today from my home in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I live year-round. As I've said in each of the previous two presentations, I'm so sad that I'm not up there in Lake Placid with all of you making music. We would have had our third Sunday concert tonight, and I'm very sad that we had to cancel our season, but obviously there are circumstances that are out of our control. And I hope that these presentations that we're doing for you on these Sundays has been a chance to keep in touch with us, a chance to get to know us a little bit better. We've certainly enjoyed very much doing these presentations for you. Before I introduce Anne, whose beautiful face you can see on the screen, I'm going to play something for you as I have in previous weeks. And this week, I'm going to do something for piano that has very definite connections to Lake Placid. One of Lake Placid's favorite sons is Victor Herbert, who was the great American writer of operetta. He wrote things like Naughty Marietta and Babes in Toyland. But he fell in love with the Lake Placid area right around the time when he was writing Babes in Toyland. And soon after that bought a camp on the shores of Lake Placid. And so since then, his name has very much been associated with the area. The piece I'm going to play for you is a piece that actually has been performed as well by the Lake Placid Sinfonietta many years back. It's called Indian Summer, and it's just a beautiful melody, very typical of Victor Herbert, who was a great melodist, writing simple and delightful melodies. It's almost like this piece for piano could be found in any one of his wonderful operettas. So I hope you will enjoy Indian Summer. think that actually is quite a lovely way to bring us into the world of Lake Placid. It has such a wonderful American feel to it, like a beautiful folk song. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce today Lake Placid Sinfonietta's wonderful flute player, Anne Harrow. Welcome, Anne.
Hi.
It's so good to have you with us today. So where are you doing this broadcast from?
Well, I'm actually in the Sinfonietta office. I'm in Lake Placid at the Lake Placid Center for the Arts, coming to you live from Debbie Fitz's office.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start actually with your connection to Lake Placid. Were you connected to the area before you started playing with the Sinfonietta? How did you get associated with the orchestra?
I had never been to Lake Placid before, although my mother was a native of Rochester, New York, and she used to talk about the ski train. Apparently there was a ski train that ran from Rochester up across New York State and came up to Lake Placid. So she had been up here before skiing, but I never came here. I was invited by one of the prior conductors, David Gilbert. This was in 1987, about 33 years ago. He called me on the phone and asked me if I would be interested in coming up here to play. And I'm from New York State. I grew up in Jamestown, New York, down near Chautauqua. And I went to school in Rochester. But my whole life, I had not come this far north. So that prompted me to come up here. And first time I came was to play that first season. And I fell in love with the place, just as we all do.
So have you been playing with the Sinfonietta since that year?
Yes.
Oh, isn't that fantastic? And actually now your connection to the orchestra is multiplied several times over through your family.
Yes,
how are you related to talk a little bit about that?
Well, my son-in-law is the trumpet player.
Who we met 2 weeks ago.
Saw him 2 weeks ago. My daughter Hannah has sung with the orchestra several times. Most recently, I think maybe the season before last or one before that, she sang Mahler 4. And she has regularly been a soprano soloist with us. And she used to be the librarian. She went off to Prague two summers ago to sing opera. And so Naomi, my next daughter, who's a flutist, was drafted in to be the librarian. So she's actually the current Sinfonietta librarian.
It's actually marvelous. And so all of you get to vacation together while you're working in this orchestra in the summer.
That's right. They vacation and I do dishes and practice.
I know that world very well. So you said you grew up in Jamestown, outside of Chautauqua, and how did you come to the flute? What drew you to this instrument?
My mother made me do it. To be perfectly frank, I hated the flute. I took piano lessons from a very young age, and when it came to 5th grade in school, everybody picked a band instrument. And my mom said, you should play an instrument now. So we went to the band parents' night. And they passed this little form around, and you had to check a box indicating what instrument you were interested in playing. And the flute didn't interest me in the slightest. My mom said, look, I know someone who has one. The proctor was coming along and collecting the sheets, and I was the last person, and I was paralyzed by indecision. And she said, just put flute down. I know someone that has one, and it's easy to carry. So I checked the flute, and that's how I started it. I absolutely hated it. I think I still do. Is this public? I forgot. Okay, anyway, rewind that. Well, no, you all understand, those of you that are musicians, the love-hate relationship that we have with our instruments. But I didn't like it one bit. I found it very boring. You can only play one voice on the flute, whereas when you're playing the piano, you get to play all the voices. So I was determined to quit. I left it overnight in school, and my mother would drive me to the school and make me go in and get it out of my desk. And she said, just wait till you play in a group with other people. You'll like it much better. And she was right about that. When I started playing in band in junior high, I realized, oh, wait, all the other parts are there, but they're in the other voices. So my part is just one part, and the other instruments are playing all the other parts that I would have if I played the piano with all the parts myself. So that was very interesting to me. And from that moment, I was really intrigued. about how my part fit with everybody else's part. And that's why some of the things that we're going to play today are chamber music. And that's one thing I love so much about playing in a chamber orchestra the size of the Sinfonietta is the responsibility and the interchange and the give and take and the mutual respect that develops among the musicians when they add their voices to a composition and they add their own approach and you listen to each other and you compromise and you blend. That's a wonderful part of being in the Sinfonietta.
It's really interesting when one thinks about these early days playing instruments as children. How many people say that what really drew them to music was the social aspect of it, was being around other people who were doing the same thing and creating something together that they couldn't do on their own. But everything you say about the Sinfonietta, I think, is true. And when you're playing in the Sinfonietta, do you feel this heightened responsibility just because there are so few people?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Everything you do can be heard. If you're playing in a large orchestra, you can hide a good deal of the time. But in an orchestra the size of the Sinfonietta or in a small chamber group, you actually can't hide. And in chamber music, there's no conductor. So you also have the responsibility of co-conducting with your peers based on what your part is doing. If you have a leading voice, you bring it out. If you have an inner voice, you combine with someone else, you listen. So there's really a living, breathing type of communication that goes on with live music that we really can't replicate no matter what we try to do with technology and layering in videos and posting things on Facebook. We can't replicate the live, living, breathing experience that a live chamber orchestra and a live audience interacting, all that energy really is part of the experience.
Well, here. I think a lot of people have spent a lot of time during this pandemic talking about what is the long-term effect going to be? Are we going to lose live performance because people are so used to watching videos? And I feel just the opposite. What we're doing here is great and wonderful. It's a great way to keep in touch with people that cannot come to concerts. But I don't think it can ever really come close, no matter how good they are, to being in the concert hall. So with that, let's actually go to the first of these videos that we're going to show. Do you want to set up what this is from and what the piece is that you'll be playing?
Sure. I thought our listeners would enjoy seeing a little bit of what some of us do in the off season when we're not in Lake Placid, because of course Lake Placid is the season that really matters to so many of us. We look forward to it all year. We count the days literally, and I guess we're on a countdown now for next season. But this is a recent performance I was involved in at Eastman in the very historic Kilburn Hall Recital Hall at Eastman. This is a recital with some colleagues of mine, and it is a quartet by Telemann, who is the Baroque composer, actually, who was more popular than Bach during his lifetime. This was written around 1733, and it's part of a group of pieces called the Tafelmusik, which means literally the table music. And there are 4 hours of this music Telemann wrote. And literally, these different movements were composed to accompany parts of a ceremonial princely banquet. And each of the movements were composed to go with a certain course that was part of this very formal banqueting ritual. So that each course would have a different type of music. In between courses, there would be another type of music, sort of a palate cleanser. There's a long tradition of these banquet pieces going back several hundred years, even before Telemann. But his is probably the best known example. So this is a quartet from the banquet music. I'm not sure exactly what course would be served right now during this music, but if you have snacks there, you'd be totally, now would be the good time to start eating your snacks. But so I've just chosen one movement from this quartet. It's called Allegro, which in Baroque terms means happy or cheerful. So this is going to be maybe lemon sorbet or some happy, bright sort of a flavor. And partway through it, you'll hear it, there's a change. It goes from minor to major, gets a little bit more peaceful in case you're getting indigestion from the faster tempo, and then it goes back to the faster tempo again. So this is the Allegro movement from a quartet by Telemann, and you'll see it's for 2 flutes, bassoon, cello, and the keyboard that you're going to see is a very beautiful harpsichord. Some of you may know that's kind of the forerunner of the piano, and you're going to hear the sound of it is quite different from the piano, but these are the original instruments that Telemann wrote for.
Okay, and before I switch my screen to the Telemann, I want to remind everybody that there's a question and answers button at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions that you'd like us to answer over the course of this session, just type them into the Q&A part of what you see, and we'll do our best to get to all of those questions. And if you want to speculate as to which part of the dinner is, which this piece corresponds to, you can do that too. So this is the Telemann.
I think you're muted, Stuart.
So my dad thinks that it was veal chops. I don't know, Dad. Good choice, but I don't know. Maybe. So Pat Eldridge actually has a question that that applies to what I was about to bring up with you, which is, have you been able to teach during this pandemic?
Everything was abruptly canceled in March, around what was 11th or 12th, and the school went totally online. So all of the lessons that we teach are all done now on Zoom, just as we are meeting right now on Zoom, the same platform, which is successful in some ways. It's a little tricky when a lot of our students are in Korea, in China. And if a student has a lesson from Korea, the time difference, 12 or 13 hours, makes it a little tricky to schedule lessons. And the internet is very up and down with Zoom. Some of you might be able to hear that even in this presentation. There's some delay, a little freezing up. So the teaching is very challenging. You have to be kind of creative in order to make it work, and very patient and flexible. And it's also extremely exhausting. So that's what we are doing. We're hoping to have some things live in September. We've been having meetings all summer about this. In fact, I have several more meetings while I'm up here about how we're going to transition chamber music online for those students who can't come back to campus. But we are going to offer live lessons and live chamber music with a lot of guidelines. And all the academic classes will be done via Zoom in order to free up the large rooms, because of course we're going to need huge rooms to teach the flute, voice. The distancing is many, many, many feet, and plexiglass and masks. So we're doing everything possible to get through this, and we're learning a lot of new things.
I'll bet you are. Good luck with all of that. I mean, it's such a tremendous mountain to climb, dealing with all of the issues that come along with this disease. And particularly for the flute, is my understanding, because of the way that the sound is produced.
The flute is one of the worst. In studies that have been done about aerosol particles, microscopic particles, the flute blows a very high frequency of air, a very fast jet of air stream. It splits on the top of the head joint. And so about half the air that we blow doesn't actually even go into the instrument, but it goes straight out in front at a very, very high velocity. So in terms of spitting particulate matter, we would be right at the top of the list of hazards. Also, I think singing is hazardous.
Yeah, that's what I have read as well. That even one would think that like trumpet would be the worst, but because so much is going into the instrument, by the time it comes out on the other end, a lot of those particles have dissipated or remained in the instrument. Well, again, I wish you well, these conservatories. I know the problems that orchestras are going through because I'm working with three of them presently, but I think conservatories have it much, much worse, and the financial potential for disaster is ever present. So I wish Eastman well and all of these other schools. Before we get back to Eastman, because I have more questions about that, there is a question from Nancy Emmerich Freeman, who says, can you tell us anything about the beautiful harpsichord itself? Who plays it? And it looks like a dowd. Do you know anything about that instrument?
I'm not sure if that's a dowd. Eastman owns several harpsichords. We do have a lot of early music that goes on there, and I'm not sure which one that was. That is a double manual harpsichord. The player is one of our graduate students. His name is Malcolm, and he's an organist and historic keyboardist.
He did a beautiful job.
Yeah, we have several different harpsichords of different sizes. That's one of the bigger concert instruments. The double manual means there are actually two keyboards on it, which can be coupled to amplify the thing. It's a very beautiful instrument. If you see them up close too, they're very beautiful.
And do you like playing Baroque music particularly? Is it something that speaks to you?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah. What's interesting about Telemann, I mean, in addition to being probably the most popular composer of his time, he was by far the most prolific composer of all time. And in fact, I once read an amazing piece of information that said that several professional copyists have said that they couldn't copy the amount of music that Telemann composed in their entire lifetimes. So,
Wow.
and what's astonishing about Telemann is there are some great pieces and there are a lot of good pieces. There are no bad pieces in the entire output. He's just one of these miracle composers that wrote piece after piece. So to get back to Eastman, I mean, being on the faculty of Eastman, you are on the faculty of one of the elite music schools in the world. How did this come about, and how was it returning to your alma mater as a professor rather than as a student?
Well, I did my undergrad at Eastman, and then I went out and played in different places around the country for several years, and decided I wouldn't mind moving back to Rochester. My whole family was there, my parents, and my husband had a job opportunity in Rochester, so I said, okay, I'll move back there. So I had not gone to graduate school, so I thought, as long as I'm here, I'll do some graduate work. So I started out with a teaching assistantship for graduate school at Eastman. And I hadn't thought much of doing a lot of teaching, but I was encouraged to do more of it. Apparently, my students enjoyed what I was doing. And so I ended up joining the faculty right out of graduate school. And I just stayed there.
That's rather remarkable. Does that happen often? Someone finishing graduate school and immediately transitioning into faculty?
I'm not sure. I would say probably not. But interestingly, my daughter is my daughter Hannah, the soprano, is doing that. She's working on her DMA now, which is her doctorate in musical arts, and she's already been hired for the faculty of the community music school at Eastman. So
Wow,
she's
congratulations.
doing that, and she also runs a really cutting edge program there called Pathways, which is for urban Rochester City School District students who can't afford lessons. It's a full scholarship program at Eastman in the community music school. It also involves some tutoring, some special mentoring, and my daughter Hannah runs that whole thing.
Wow, and that actually sounds like a spectacular program and an important one, especially given the climate right now. A lot of time and energy is being given towards changing the dynamic of who actually gets good quality musical education. And for many, many years, it was truly an elitist art form where only the richest people could afford quality lessons. So doing things like that really could change the face of music.
Yes, and it's all about access. The kids come in, they go to concerts, they do all kinds of social events together. It's been wonderful. And Eastman really, that was their mission. When George Eastman, the philanthropist of Eastman Kodak, people will know that name associated with Kodak, gave money to start a music school in Rochester, his purpose was for the betterment and the enrichment of community life. So we actually take that part of the mission very seriously.
Well, good for Eastman and really great for Hannah. That's fantastic. So let's transition a little bit and head towards the next piece that we're going to play. How much of your performing life outside of the summer season in Lake Placid is devoted to chamber music as opposed to orchestral music?
Well, I'm not currently playing in any orchestra, although I have, and I did used to play in the Philharmonic in Rochester. The teaching takes up quite a bit of time and energy in order to do it well. Um, but I am also the head of the chamber music department at Eastman. So most of the opportunity I get to perform at Eastman with my colleagues is chamber music.
Yeah.
And it has become maybe my thing, I guess. It's what I really enjoy. Playing in a big orchestra is also wonderful. But as I said, the close community and mutual responsibility that you have as part of a chamber group is really unique.
And the richness of the repertoire. I mean,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
it's such a marvelous repertoire. And the performing experience, playing for smaller audiences in smaller halls, I think is really quite wonderful and very different from a large orchestral concert. Which is
There,
also one of the reasons I like the Sinfonietta so much, because it kind of bridges both sides of that equation.
it does, and that's wonderful. And there is something very unique about that kind of intimacy that you have in a smaller setting.
Yep.
Really
So
great.
let's talk a little bit about this next piece, and why don't you tell us what the attendees are going to hear and who wrote it?
Well, this is a little bit unusual, actually. This is by a contemporary American composer. His name is Ken Benshoof, and that's spelled Benshoof. He's based in the Seattle area. I guess he grew up on a farm in Nebraska. He studied composition in Europe. He's a very eclectic composer. He likes to say that he's world famous among piccolo players. And the reason for that is that he's written 4 compositions that feature the piccolo. Other composers don't do this, and there's probably a very good reason for it. I'll let you decide that when you hear this. But this is very unusual. It's a solo piece for piccolo, violin, viola, and cello. And we're just going to give you a couple short clips from it. It's called In Shadow, Light. And the whole piece is about the interchange of shadows and lights. And it was written in 1997, so it's quite contemporary. We're going to start out hearing the first movement. And it starts out, the directions on the music are in shadow. So the music you're going to hear at the beginning for a couple of minutes is very dissonant. It's supposed to create a feeling of darkness or ambiguity that gradually transitions into light. Maybe you could imagine something like a sunrise after a very, very dark night. The piccolo you'll hear, piccolo is a color instrument, really. And usually you just hear it very loud and screechy on top of the orchestra. But in this piece, you'll hear lower parts of the piccolo, lyrical parts. The piccolo in this very beginning part transitions very quickly into a bird. And you're going to hear some bird calls, some flutter tonguing, which is when we roll our R's like that when we're playing. So you're going to hear sort of some trills that sound like birds. And it starts out, I think, the strings are darker and kind of searching and dissonant, but the piccolo is maybe a little more cheerful and bright and is trying to get them to lighten up a little bit. And so it transitions into a second section that's called bright. And by the time this portion ends, you'll hear that things have gotten quite a bit brighter and more cheerful. So listen to this as if the strings are creating this kind of murky, dark background, and the piccolo is trying to get them to, lighten up a little bit, maybe.
Okay, so am I doing both of the 2 excerpts this time?
It's just one excerpt that's all in one at first. It's that first 5 or 6 minutes.
Okay, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
Yes.
Fabulous. Oh no, did I just lose it? I think I did.
Oh, you did?
Oh no, what have I done? So I'm going to take just a moment, folks.
It was the other one, yeah.
To get this back. It shouldn't take more than a moment. Okay, here we go. And I want to go full screen. Okay, so we have it here. Why can't I go full screen? So do you remember what number it started at?
Yes. We started this at 2 minutes and 13 seconds.
2 minutes and 14 seconds?
That's good. Close enough.
Okay, it should be just a moment, folks.
Yeah, you don't want my
apologies. The dreaded circle. This is where technology breaks down. You've seen it now live on the internet. This will just take a moment while it loads. And then I think we'll be all right. Oh, the best of plans. Well, I think this is a good moment for me to have a sip of wine. What do you say? It is happy hour after all. Okay. Come up on internet. There we go.
I think you're muted.
I did it again. I find that piece absolutely delightful. And I love the contrasts that are drawn musically in that movement. Some of it sounds just like a dance. When you're preparing a piece like this, um, do you wait a while until you've worked out the notes with your colleagues before you think about those kinds of issues, like what are we actually trying to get across? Because some new music is extremely complex. Um, do you have to first get a grip on how the piece is going to sound, or do you immediately dive into those issues when you begin?
Well, this one is very challenging to put together because of the issues with such different instruments, the different instrument families. The piccolo doesn't automatically blend very well with what would normally be a string quartet. Um, so there's a challenge there. It's difficult to tune sometimes with the string instruments when it's by itself. So there were a lot of challenges. We didn't have a lot of rehearsal time, as is often the case. All of those performers that you saw are all major faculty members at Eastman. And in fact, the violinist also plays in the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. So she's flying back and forth to New York all the time in between teaching her violin class, her studio. And the cellist is flying back and forth to London all the time. So there are a lot of challenges with having adequate rehearsal time. So you study the piece and the score by yourself first, and when you come in, you're ready to bring an interpretation with you. And really, with a piece that has such a picturesque title, In Shadow, Light, it tells you right away, as well as the titles in the movements, that there's going to be a very important coloristic, sort of poetic component to it that's really, I think, just integrated right into every part of the writing. So we actually started right off looking for those connections.
Yeah, it's a wonderful performance, and your colleagues are fabulous as well. Um, I'm interested in the piccolo as an instrument in chamber music because it isn't a common instrument choice for a flutist. First of all, do all flutists automatically play piccolo well? And then the second question is, how often do you get to play piccolo in a setting like this in chamber music performances?
Do all flutists play piccolo? These days, most of the students that I have at Eastman realize that they really need to have piccolo. One thing I do there is teach piccolo. I teach piccolo lessons. So the students are extremely interested in learning it. Some of them come in with no prior experience. Others have played in youth orchestras. The kids that are in youth orchestra have usually had to play some piccolo. Some flutists absolutely hate the piccolo and they refuse to touch it. But I'm not sure how practical that is. Most of them realize they're going to need it for auditions. It shows up on auditions. So when we dig in and really work on it as the the high soprano of the orchestra. The in a way, it's the diva, the coloratura soprano. We work on it that way as a lyrical instrument, especially if you're playing Rossini excerpts, things like that. But then also as the color voice, as you hear really well in this piece we just played. The most everybody becomes enamored with it.
Yeah,
And
so do you think that Rossini was kind of the breakthrough from piccolo being just kind of like the shrill octave above the flute so it could be heard note to being really I mean, in Rossini, the piccolo is a solo instrument and very virtuosic.
sort of
Are
the
there
comic,
pieces
yeah.
are there pieces before Rossini where the piccolo is used to that extent?
Beethoven used it in the Fifth Symphony. It's used mostly with military associations because of
Mm-hmm.
the associations with the fife and the different pipes and drums who would actually signal, give military calls and signals on the battlefield, because over the sound of battle with cannons, you could not hear somebody giving commands vocally. So the fife and drum corps were actually extremely important to military strategy. So the
Yeah,
piccolo, most people still associate it maybe with military. We have Stars and Stripes Forever and a lot
that's
of
right.
really great march parts that are very military. But Beethoven used it in the Ninth Symphony and the Fifth Symphony as in a military sense to symbolize military victory. So
That's
it
right.
was used mostly that way. Rossini did make it a little bit more lyrical and either that or comical. And that's another aspect that it has.
So do you want to return to the second excerpt from this piece and
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
a little bit about that?
yeah, that one you had queued up to start around 9 minutes and 50 seconds. That's
I will
nine
find it.
five oh. Actually, this piece is the only piece I know of for piccolo with strings in a solo kind of quartet setting. I don't know of any other ones. The
Oh, wow.
Hindemith, Paul Hindemith is a composer some people will recognize. He has a piccolo part in his very famous wind quintet from about 1925. There is pretty eclectic of him to put a piccolo in that. There is a waltz movement that uses the piccolo.
Neat.
Um, and the piccolos are also used in the Strauss waltzes to give that sort of bright,
That's
sweet
right.
color above the orchestra in the Viennese waltz. And then Mahler, of course, picks up on that color and uses the piccolo so brilliantly. Shostakovich, also one of the greatest composers for piccolo. He
He
writes,
knew how to do it.
yeah, and Ben Schuf, this composer, was very influenced by Shostakovich. Also jazz, pop, folk music, and Baroque music. But Shostakovich captures sort of the dark, mysterious, very lonely voice that the piccolo can have in the lower register.
Hmm.
And also the screechy, brilliant, somewhat sarcastic, militaristic quality all over Shostakovich. But this next little section, I just wanted to play you 2 more minutes of this Ben Schuf piece because it is so unusual. And this is my favorite part, maybe the happiest or the most cheerful part of the piece. And we can all use that right now. I think in our
That's right.
lives, yeah. This little section does sound a little bit jazzy. You can hear some eclectic, some syncopated rhythms, a little bit dance music maybe influenced. And this little section, just a couple minutes long, it's called Cloudless. The directions are cloudless and easy. So I guess that would be blue skies ahead. So that's
I'm
my,
all for that.
yeah. So
So
that's
let me,
at about 9 minutes and 50 seconds is where that
it'll
starts.
take just a moment for it to queue up, but I
Yep.
will have it
Yep.
in a moment.
Excellent.
Okay. 9 minutes and 50 seconds. Nope,
Uh-oh.
that's not what we want.
It went back to the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, gracious. Sorry about this, folks. We will work out these kinks as the weeks go on.
Yeah. Are there other questions while you're doing that? Did anyone have
Yep.
any?
Do you have the Q&A open? Actually, there was a question for me
Oh, I
asking
see
what
that.
my orchestras are doing during this, my other orchestras are doing during this time. The truth is a lot of the same kind of thing. The Florida Orchestra, of which I'm the principal guest conductor down in the Tampa Bay area, which, as many of you know, has been hit very hard these last several weeks, did a whole series of things they called cocktails with a composer. Sorry, cocktails with a conductor, which also interviewed several of the players from their orchestra. And my orchestra here in Harrisburg is beginning a video series to take us into the season, and that we will be continuing regardless of the pandemic as we go forward. We don't have a title for it yet, but it'll be along a similar format, introducing our players to our audience to the players in the orchestra. I'm very pleased that we have these technologies to keep in touch. But I think I have this queued up now, so let's see if I can get this to work.
Can you all hear me? Anybody hear me? I think we lost Stuart's internet. Okay, hi. Okay, you can hear me. I can't see any of you, but I'm glad you can hear me. I think what happened is Stuart was playing that, and it's possible that his internet froze. So we can wait and see if he comes back on. Otherwise, if you have any questions while I'm on here, and until Stuart joins us again, I would be glad to answer them. I now have my question and answer panel open. So if anybody wants to, about piccolos, types of piccolos. There is one type of piccolo that's commonly used today. It's just the piccolo in C. It's actually in the same key as the flute, but it plays an octave higher than the flute. It's really useful for if you play all the way up to the top of the flute as high as you can go, and then you pick up the piccolo and the piccolo finishes it, keeps going. So the piccolos commonly are made out of different kinds of wood. So there are different types of wood piccolos. The most common type of wood is grenadilla wood, which is from Africa, and it is an endangered wood. It's kind of the same wood that clarinets are often made out of, but people experiment with different types of wood. Cocos wood is another wood, which is a brown hardwood that's used. Some piccolos can be made out of rosewood, and the piccolos that you might see if you're watching say a military band in a parade, are made out of metal. They're silver piccolos.
Oh my!
So there's Stuart's back.
I am so
I think he
sorry
froze
about that.
up.
We
He
must have had
froze.
some kind of a power surge that I had a bright flash and then it just disappeared.
Uh-oh.
So.
The
But I'm
piccolo
back.
blew out the system.
So my apologies,
Piccolo
first of all, to you, Anne, for interrupting that beautiful performance, and
we were
also
almost
to
at the end
everybody.
anyway.
So, well, actually, we're nearing the end of our time here, and again, boy, this has been some day with all of these glitches. So, again, please accept my apologies for all of that. So, before anything else, how long are you planning to be up in Lake Placid this time around, Anne?
I'm here for a couple weeks.
Nice. And do you have any special plans outside of just relaxation?
Well, I like to hike. I'm kind of slow, but I have some hikes planned. And hopefully I'll be able to do something besides attend faculty meetings on Zoom, which is the way I've been spending a lot of my summer. So
yeah, I can imagine that that's the case. I think it's the same for many of us, that Zoom has become the reality of everyday life. Before we go to our playoff selection, which I think I might ask you to play because I don't know if I can do it. I will try.
I have it.
Oh, you have it. Is to tell everybody who's an attendee, first of all, thank you so much for being part of this. And if you have feedback other than the technical glitches, which sadly we're well aware of, please do give us feedback on what you'd like to see, what you'd like us to discuss, the kinds of shows that you'd be interested in, and also any feedback that you might have on the various things that we've done so far. We've done 3 of these and we will do at least 3 more. We have wonderful things lined up for you for the upcoming weeks. So please do that. And second of all, I wish everybody well, stay safe. And I hope that this pandemic will be done very soon so that we can be bringing music to you live once more. So Anne, I'm going to hand it once more over to you with many thanks for doing this with us today. Tell us a little bit about what you have for the playoff segment for our show today.
Okay, I'm just going to play you off with a couple minutes of a Bach trio sonata. And this was recorded on an iPhone, so it's not the most hi-fi recording, which maybe doesn't matter on this format. But I thought you might be interested in seeing it because it's me playing. Also, my daughter Naomi is playing flute, and Stephen Franklin, our trumpet player, is playing piano on this. So this was recorded at a festival in South Carolina last summer. And so this will be our closing, and feel free to sign off whenever you need to, but we'll let this play for probably about 3 minutes. And thank you, everybody. Really appreciate all of your attention. And so here we are. I'll try to see if I can do my screen share. I think I should be ready to go here. Okay, looks good. Here we go. So there we are. I don't know how well that was playing, but
It came
There's a
through
little
pretty
taste.
well. It was lovely to see Naomi and Stephen playing together with you. Is it a special pleasure to play with your family?
I think you might be muted again.
No, I don't think so. Can you hear me? I guess I am muted. I don't know.
Oh, no, I can hear you now.
Okay, I was just wondering, is it a special pleasure to perform with Naomi and Stephen?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a ton of fun.
It was really lovely to see them. And it was great to see Stephen playing piano. We had him on the opening segment of this series, and he talked a little bit about playing piano with the Sinfonietta. So ladies and gentlemen, you may very well see Stephen playing again. And,
Yes.
and thank you so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure to see you face to face and to talk with you. And thank you again to all of the attendees. Hope to see you next week at the same time. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.